MIDI keyboard made for FL Studio. Just saying it makes me emotional. Okay, it's not that deep, but it's pretty huge. Ableton had Launchpad for years and now we have FLKeys. But how good is it really? And is it worth it? Well, if you don't own one yet, this video has answers to all your questions. And if you do own a FLKey already, stick around and I will show you all the features, my personal opinion, and you might learn something new. Just okay.
One sound goodizer a day keeps the doctor away.
Let's go! Search in Google for Novation FLKey drivers, go into the first link. I will actually put the link for this in the description. But here you can download the driver, and the important part is to go to the Components web tab. Assuming your keyboard is connected to your system, it should show up here. Make sure that on the top right it says up to date. If you just bought the keyboard and it says that it needs to update the firmware, make sure to do that first because you're gonna run into some problems. From there, click on Manage FLKey, and here you can create custom modes, upload the ones you made for others to use, and I will show you exactly what these are for later in the video. At the back of the keyboard, you of course have your USB and MIDI output, plus a jack input for your sustain pedal. Let's start breaking down the features with the pads. By default, the pads are set to channel rack mode, which means that each pad is mapped to an instrument within the channel rack. But thankfully, all the pads, knobs, and the faders come with pre-mapped modes, and you can go through them by holding the shift button and selecting the pad with the corresponding feature that you want written under it. Let's change the pads to instrument mode, which means that each pad will now play a note from the selected instrument. You can use these two buttons to change the instrument within the channel rack. But is it possible to map each pad to a chord within a scale? You can do that by holding Shift and selecting Scale Chord Mode. Right now the keyboard is set to C minor scale, and I will show you how to change that later, but each of these pads will now play a chord within the C minor scale. If you are using a FL Studio stock plugin, you can use these two buttons to the left of the pads to change presets. Another great pad mode that you can use to speed up your workflow, especially for programming drums, is the sequencer pad mode. You can now sequence notes for each sound inside the channel rack directly from your keyboard. Let's switch back to the channel rack mode. To speed up the process of programming your hi-hats and hi-hat rolls, this MIDI keyboard comes with a note repeat feature. Hold Shift and tap on note repeat, so it starts flashing. Now the lowest keys on your keyboard can be used to change the speed of note repeat. Press play. Now I know the tone of the intro and the actual tutorial are miles apart. But in my defense, when I go in the zone, I become all geeky. Let's move on to the knobs above. Just like the pads, you have different pre-mapped modes for the knobs too. You can change in between them by holding Shift and tapping on any of the 6 knobs above. By default, the pads are mapped to channel volume, and I can tell that because it's highlighted brighter than the rest. The same with the pad modes. Using the channel volume mode, you can change the volume of each individual sound inside the channel rack. This way you can set up a quick balance between your sounds directly from your keyboard. We can also use them for channel pan, which are just to the left of the volume knobs inside the channel rack. We can map them to mixer volume or mixer pan. However, in my personal workflow, I rather use them on plugin mode, which means that if you are using an FL Studio stock plugin like Flex, these 8 pads will automatically control the 8 macros inside Flex. I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty impressed with the build quality of these knobs. Did you know that if you spend 1 second to like the video, 5 seconds to write the comment, and even go as far as subscribing to the channel. You can make this man on the screen much happier than he woke up this morning. Did you do it already? How about now? Did you? Did you now? Let's go. That's why you're a top godizer. It's worth mentioning that you have 2 custom modes for the pads, 1 custom mode for the knobs, and 1 custom mode for the faders, which we're gonna get into right now. The faders by default are mapped to mixer volume, which means that each fader will control the mixer track volume. The responsiveness between the DAW and the keyboard feels great, even though these are not motorized faders, which means that if you set one of your faders all the way down and then change the value using your mouse or an automation, the fader will not move on the keyboard, and the next time that you touch on the keyboard, the volume will jump back to the fader position on the keyboard. You can change the fader mode to channel volume, which will control the volume in the channel rack again, or to plugin mode, same as the knobs. Bear in mind that you cannot set your faders and knobs to the same mode at the same time. So right now my knobs are set to plugin mode and are controlling the macros within Flex, and if I set my faders to plugin mode too, nothing will happen. So I'm gonna change my knobs to channel volume and now set my faders to plugin mode so that they will control the macros within Flex. By the way, you can use those buttons under the faders to mute or unmute tracks within the mixer. You have 2 buttons with mixer written above them. Using these, you can determine which 8 tracks within the mixer you want to control. I just noticed that you cannot control the tracks that you dock to the right or to the left, which is a shame, I'm not gonna lie, because I wanted to control my buses or my effects. The keys are full-sized and semi-weighted. It's worth mentioning that under the keys are empty. That's not a surprise, especially for semi-weighted keys. Velocity responsiveness feels quite natural. Just before getting this keyboard, I was using an 88 key hammered action heavyweight keys, and after using that for years, coming to this, the keys don't feel cheap or hard to play. Let's talk about my favorite feature of this keyboard. For those of you who are not confident playing the keys, but you still want to play your parts live, apart from the scale chord pad mode, the keys themselves can be mapped to a key and scale. Hold shift button and press scale. Then let's say we want to go to A sharp or B flat minor. I'm gonna press that. Then using these pads, you can select your mode and scale. A sharp minor, A sharp major, A sharp Dorian. Let's go for A sharp minor. Press the scale key again. Now the keys are playable. This has to be the first time I've talked about scales and keys and I didn't use D minor. Emotional, damn it! I don't know, I already feel guilty. I'm gonna play all white keys, and if you pay attention to the screen, you will see that the notes that are not within the A sharp minor scale will not be played. If you are using smaller versions of FL keys, you probably need to change between octaves more than me or the guys who have 61 keys. It's super simple to do that using the plus and minus buttons. FL keys also comes with a very responsive modulation wheel and the pitch bend wheel. You can see that the modulation wheel is already mapped to the plugin, even though I didn't map it myself. In some plugins like Contact or Omnisphere, you might have to do that manually, but I've made a video showing you exactly how to do it, plus a couple extra tricks, and I will link it for you up top. You just watched me play some random notes to demonstrate the scale feature, but I didn't press record. You can use the score lock button to bring them all back. You also have quantize, undo, redo, alongside your normal play, stop, and record buttons. The smallest one in the family is FLKey Mini with 25 keys, no faders, and a touch-sensitive mod wheel and pitch bend. Next is FLKey 35, still no faders, but the wheels are wheels. From there we go into FLKey 49, which is the one I own, and last but not least FLKey 61, which doesn't have anything extra compared to mine, apart from the keys, of course. My final verdict on the keyboard is, all things aside, I think that if your primary DAW is FL Studio and you want a budget MIDI keyboard, this is the one. Because the price is the same or lower than its competitors, everything is mapped and ready as soon as you plug it in, and Novation has been making keyboards and different sorts of MIDI controllers for years. They have a fantastic reputation for good quality products, and this one is just another one of those specifically made for the FL Studio gang.